Hello and welcome to the Dailies. International media kept a close watch on President Trump's Asia tour as he arrived in South Korea, with attention focused on his talks with regional leaders over trade and security. At the same time, Hurricane Melissa's catastrophic impact across Jamaica and its approach towards Cuba dominated global headlines. Meanwhile, renewed violations by both Israel and Hamas cast doubt on the fragile ceasefire in Gaza, raising fears of renewed escalation. We'll start with the latest developments there in the Middle East, as Trump's ceasefire deal, as we mentioned, is put to the test after Israel and the Palestinians violate the ceasefire. An Israeli soldier was killed yesterday in sniper attack on an excavator near Rafah in the Strip. And on the other hand, Israeli airstrikes on Gaza killed more than 80 Palestinians, including children, after Israel accused Hamas of breaching the ceasefire over delays in returning hostages. International mediators urge restraint to prevent the fragile truce from collapsing. Israeli media reflected a mix of anger and anxiety, with right-leaning outlets urging a stronger military response and others warning that renewed escalation could jeopardize hostage recovery efforts. Broadly, coverage emphasized public frustration with Hamas and pressure on Netanyahu to balance retaliation with US ceasefire commitments. The Times of Israel examines how Donald Trump, despite facing broad domestic and regional pressure, remains publicly committed to the fragile ceasefire in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is under intense strain. Hamas has resumed attacks, hostage bodies remain uncovered, and Israel's internal pressures for retaliation are mounting. The piece outlines how Trump's leverage keeps Israel in check, yet Netanyahu's patience is wearing thin. It argues that while the White House seeks to protect its signature foreign policy win, the underlying tensions may soon force both sides into a perilous escalation. Israel Hayom reveals that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened an emergency meeting after Hamas returned a body not matching any of the 13 known Israeli hostages in what Israel calls a breach of US-brokered ceasefire deal. Netanyahu is reportedly considering several retaliatory measures, including shifting the IDF yellow line westwards to reclaim territory, or tightening aid convoys or restricting goods entering Gaza, and also keeping the Rafah crossing closed. Far-right ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich are urging him to rearrest militants freed under the deal. The piece underscores Netanyahu's balancing act between US diplomatic caution and domestic pressure for decisive action, portraying a government on edge as the fragile ceasefire in Gaza teeters towards collapse. Palestinian media condemned the Israeli strikes as a grave breach of the ceasefire, highlighting the high civilian toll, including children and displaced families. Coverage framed the attacks as evidence of Israeli disregard for international mediation and a continuation of collective punishment in Gaza. As well as reporting on the details of the latest escalation, the Palestine Chronicle profiles several US congressional candidates who are rejecting AIPAC-linked campaign funding as part of a broader shift in the Democratic Party's engagement with Israel. It argues that the growing coalition of progressives deem AIPAC's influence less tenable and seek independence from large pro-Israel lobby money. Among those names are Abdul Sayed in Michigan and Karishma Manzoor in New Hampshire. The piece also uses polling, donation data charts and intra-party commentary to illustrate the cultural and ideological stakes of this move. While still a niche stance, the article positions this trend as indicative of deeper frustrations in US foreign policy fundraising norms. Another big story that dominated headlines worldwide is Hurricane Melissa's devastation across Jamaica and its advance towards Cuba. The New York Times delivers a compelling and data-rich report on the hurricane, blending first-hand accounts, official briefings and live updates to capture the storm's unprecedented power. 185 miles per hour winds, also massive flooding and near total communication collapse dominated the scene. Visuals also including storm tracking maps and also pressure charts vividly illustrate Melissa's record low 892 millibar pressure and projected path through the Caribbean. The piece also highlights Cuba's mass evacuation of 750,000 residents and the broader humanitarian implications of infrastructure collapse. The analysis raises critical issues of climate vulnerability and inequity, emphasizing how Caribbean nations bear the brunt of intensifying climate disasters despite minimal contributions to global emissions. The scenes that came out of Jamaica were quite dramatic. Here you can see people walking on the road, as you can see, during the passing of a Hurricane Melissa in Rocky Point. Also, other pictures, as you can see, the storm passes on from Jamaica to Cuba and people are bracing for its impact. Also, more pictures were published, also how the storm looks through the satellite after it made a landfall in Jamaica. American media also focused on some local stories, like the ongoing controversy surrounding President Trump's new changes to the White House. The Washington Post details a major shakeup in how the government manages the arts and cultures as the Trump administration abruptly dismisses all 6 members of the Commission of Fine Arts, CFA. A century-long advisory body tasked with reviewing major architectural projects in Washington, D.C. The CFA's ouster comes amid plans for Trump-backed powerhouse developments, including a new $300 million White House ballroom and a monumental arch. Experts in the piece warn that this signals not just a personal swap, but a shift in governance as design review mechanisms are bypassed and political alignment supersedes expertise. The report scrutinizes how these firings reflect Trump's America First aesthetic and centralized approach to transforming the Capitol. The Wall Street Journal, as many other outlets, reported on President Trump's public acknowledgement of the constitutional limit preventing him from seeking a 3rd presidential term, stating, "I'm not allowed to run," while en route to South Korea. The piece traces the recent surge of speculation fueled by SOS icons, Trump 2028 merchandise, and a proposed amendment effort in Congress, and situates Trump's comments in the context of his broader strategic shifts. It also highlights behind-the-scenes debates within Republican Party about succession, naming potential contenders such as Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance. Newsweek offers a timely and insightful look at the tight mayoral contest in New York City, spotlighting Democratic state legislator Zohran Mamdani as the clear front-runner ahead of next Tuesday's elections. Supported by prominent progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and also Bernie Sanders, Mamdani leads centrist rival Andrew Cuomo and Republican Curtis Sliwa by roughly 10 points, according to recent polls. Analysts caution that upside for Cuomo and Sliwa remains, especially if turnout skews towards older and more moderate voters, but describe Mamdani's position as indeed solid. The piece underscores the race's broader significance, a referendum on progressive versus centrist visions in the city's politics. And we'll end with the Times, which reported on the unveiling of fresh photographic evidence that Prince Andrew hosted convicted abusers Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell and Harvey Weinstein at his residence Royal Lodge in Windsor in 2006, just weeks after a US arrest warrant was issued for Epstein. The revelations exacerbate royal family tensions, especially as Andrew faces increasing pressure to vacate prestigious estate and relinquish formal titles. The piece underscores how the image-controlled monarchy is grappling with operational and moral strain amid mounting scandal. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.